Hello and welcome to The Drowsy Architect. We tell the stories of the world's greatest buildings, slowly, gently, as bedtime stories for grown-ups. The narration is calm, the music is soft, and if you fall asleep before the end, that is exactly what we are here for. Tonight, we travel to the Highlands of Ethiopia, where 800 years ago, a king carved 11 churches downward into the living rock, not built from the ground up, but hollowed out from the earth itself, complete with columns and arches and windows, all from a single piece of stone, a New Jerusalem hidden in the mountains of Africa. Now settle in and let us begin. There is a place in the Ethiopian highlands where the earth opens up and swallows holiness whole. You are walking there now. It is dawn, the very earliest dawn, when the sky is not yet blue but something softer, something between grey and violet and the palest, most uncertain rose. The sun has not crested the mountains. The light is not yet light. It is the memory of light, the promise of it, seeping into the world the way water seeps into stone, slowly, gently, without force or hurry. You are at 2,500 meters above sea level. The air is thin here. You noticed it when you arrived. A slight breathlessness, a feeling that each lungful is not quite enough, that you must breathe a little deeper, a little more deliberately to get what you need. But you have adjusted now. Your body has found its rhythm. And in truth, there is something beautiful about the thinness of the air at altitude. It makes everything sharper. The light is cleaner. The colors are more vivid. The silence has a crystalline quality, as though even sound must work harder to travel through this rarefied atmosphere. The ground beneath your feet is red, a deep, warm, iron-rich red, the color of dried blood, the color of terracotta, the color of the earth in places where the soil has been shaped by volcanic forces over millennia. It stains the soles of your shoes. It coats the lower branches of the eucalyptus trees that line the path. It is everywhere, this red earth, and it gives the landscape a warmth, an intimacy, as though the land itself is blushing in the early light. Eucalyptus trees, they are not native here. They were brought from Australia over a century ago, but they have claimed these highlands as their own. They stand tall and silvery-barked along the ridgelines and the paths, their narrow leaves hanging in still curtains in the windless dawn, and their scent, you breathe it in now, that sharp, clean, medicinal fragrance, eucalyptus and red earth, and the faintest trace of wood smoke drifting from the town below. It is the smell of morning in the Ethiopian highlands. It is the smell of a place that has been holy for longer than most nations have existed. And then you hear it. Chanting, distant, rising from somewhere below you, from somewhere beneath the ground. A single voice at first, deep and resonant and ancient, singing in a language you do not understand but somehow feel. The melody is not Western. It does not follow the scales or progressions your ear expects. It rises and falls in intervals that seem to come from a different musical tradition entirely, which is exactly what they are. This is Giyorgis, the liturgical language of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, a language that has been dead in daily conversation for centuries, but lives on in prayer and song, preserved like an insect in amber, beautiful and strange and perfectly intact. The chanting grows. A second voice joins the first, then a third. The harmonies are austere and haunting, not the lush polyphony of European church music, but something older and more direct, something that seems to bypass the mind entirely and speak to the body, to the bones, to the deep, quiet places inside you where language has no purchase. You follow the path, the red earth, the eucalyptus shadows, the voices rising from the ground like steam from a hot spring, and then you reach the edge. You look down, and there, carved into the living rock, sunk 12 meters below the surface of the earth, is a church. Not built upon the rock, not constructed from blocks of stone laid one upon another, carved into the rock, cut down from the surface, hewn from the mountain itself, a building that was never assembled but rather revealed, the way a sculptor reveals a figure hidden inside a block of marble, except this is not marble, this is volcanic tuff, and this is not a figure, this is an entire church, with walls and windows and a roof and columns and arches and doorways, all of it. Every last detail carved from a single piece of stone. This is Lalibela, and nothing you have ever seen has prepared you for it. You stand at the edge and you stare. Your mind works to make sense of what your eyes are seeing. It tries to categorize, to compare, to file this image alongside the other buildings you have known, but there is nothing to compare it to. This is not like a cathedral. Cathedrals rise, this sinks. This is not like a cave temple. Cave temples are carved into hillsides. This is carved downward from flat ground. This is something new, something your mind has no framework for, and so you simply look. And the looking is enough. The morning light catches the upper walls of the church. The stone turns pink, then gold, then a warm, deep amber as the sun clears the ridge. Shadows recede, details emerge, window frames, moldings, carved crosses catching the early light. The building reveals itself the way a photograph reveals itself in a developing tray, slowly, details swimming up from the blur, becoming sharp, becoming real. Below you, in the shadows at the base of the trench, a figure moves, white-robed, barefoot, a priest making his way to the entrance of the church for the morning liturgy. He does not look up, he does not notice you. He has walked this path every morning for decades. The church is not remarkable to him. It is simply where he prays, where he has always prayed. Where his father prayed, and his grandfather prayed, and their fathers and grandfathers before them, stretching back through the centuries in an unbroken chain of devotion. The extraordinary has become the everyday. The miraculous has become the mundane, and there is something beautiful in that too. Let yourself settle now. Let the image hold you. The thin mountain air, the red earth, the eucalyptus scent, the distant chanting rising from the stone. There is nowhere else you need to be tonight. Nothing that requires your attention. No messages waiting, no tasks undone. Just this ancient place, and this story, and the slow, steady rhythm of your breathing. Breathe in, gently. Feel the cool, thin highland air fill your lungs. Breathe out, slowly. Feel your shoulders drop. Feel the small muscles around your eyes soften. Feel the weight of the day lift from you like mist lifting from a valley, dissolving into nothing, leaving only stillness and warmth and the quiet, ancient comfort of stone. You are safe, you are warm beneath your covers, and this story will carry you, the way the chanting carries through the rock, gently, steadily, into the deep and dreamless dark. To understand Lalibela, you must first understand Ethiopia, and to understand Ethiopia, you must understand that this is a country unlike any other in Africa, unlike any other in the world, perhaps, a country that has kept its own time, literally and figuratively, for thousands of years. Ethiopia was never colonized, while the rest of the African continent was carved up by European powers in the 19th century, while borders were drawn by men who had never set foot on the soil they were dividing. Ethiopia remained sovereign, independent, its own. The Italians tried briefly in the 1930s. They failed. Ethiopia endured. It is the oldest independent country in Africa, one of the oldest in the world. And its connection to Christianity is older than almost any nation on earth. Think about that for a moment. Let it settle. Most of the nations of Europe did not become Christian until the 5th, 6th, 7th centuries or later. The Scandinavian countries were still worshipping Norse gods when Ethiopia had already been Christian for 700 years. England was pagan when Ethiopian monks were already copying the Gospels onto parchment in Highland monasteries. The Christianity of Ethiopia is not borrowed. It is not inherited from a colonial power. It is original. It is ancient. It is woven into the bedrock of the nation, the way the churches of Lalibela are carved into the bedrock of the mountains. And the roots go deeper still, deeper than Christianity itself, back into the world of the Old Testament, back to a time of kings and queens and sacred covenants and golden arcs carried through the desert. The story begins, as so many Ethiopian stories do, with Solomon and Sheba. The Queen of Sheba, Makeda as the Ethiopians call her, traveled from her kingdom in the south to visit King Solomon in Jerusalem. She had heard of his wisdom. She wanted to test it. She brought gifts of gold and spices and precious stones, and Solomon, impressed by her beauty and her intelligence, received her with honor. What happened next depends on which tradition you follow. The Ethiopian account, preserved in the Kebra Nagast, the Glory of Kings, the great national epic of Ethiopia, says that Solomon tricked Makeda into sharing his bed. She returned to her kingdom carrying his child. That child was Menelik I, the founder of the Solomonic dynasty, the line of Ethiopian emperors that would claim descent from Solomon and Sheba for 3,000 years. All the way to Haile Selassie in the 20th century. But Menelik did more than establish a dynasty. According to tradition, when he grew to manhood, he traveled to Jerusalem to visit his father, and when he returned to Ethiopia, he brought with him the Ark of the Covenant. The actual Ark, the gold-covered chest containing the stone tablets on which God had inscribed the 10 Commandments, the most sacred object in the Hebrew Bible, the object that had dwelt in the Holy of Holies in Solomon's temple. It is said to be in Ethiopia still, in a small chapel in the ancient city of Aksum, guarded by a single monk who has devoted his life to its protection. The Ark rests. No one may see it, no one may photograph it, no one may enter the chapel except the guardian. When the guardian dies, a new guardian is chosen. He enters the chapel. He will never leave. He will spend the rest of his life in the company of the Ark, praying, fasting, keeping watch over the holiest object in the world. It is the loneliest and most sacred vocation on earth. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church states this as simple fact. The Ark is here. It has always been here. It will always be here. Whether you believe this or not is beside the point. What matters is that Ethiopia does. What matters is that this belief, this profound, unshakable conviction that Ethiopia is the custodian of God's most sacred relic, has shaped the nation's identity for millennia. Ethiopia does not merely practice Christianity. Ethiopia breathes it. Christianity is woven into the soil of this country the way roots are woven into earth. The Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church is one of the oldest Christian institutions in the world. Christianity came to Ethiopia in the 4th century, brought by 2 Syrian brothers, Frumentius and Edesius, who were shipwrecked on the Red Sea coast and taken to the court of the Aksumite king. Frumentius converted the king, was consecrated as the first bishop of Aksum by Athanasius of Alexandria. and established a church that would endure unbroken for 17 centuries. It is a church unlike any other. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church follows its own calendar, 13 months of sunshine, as the Ethiopian tourism slogan puts it, running 7 or 8 years behind the Gregorian calendar used by the rest of the world. It has its own Bible, containing books not found in any other Christian canon. The Book of Enoch, the Book of Jubilees, texts that were lost to the rest of Christendom but preserved in the Giyorgis language of Ethiopia. Copied by hand onto goatskin parchment by monks in Highland monasteries, generation after generation, for century upon century. Ethiopian Christians observe dietary laws that echo the Old Testament. They do not eat pork. They fast for long periods, over 200 days a year in total, abstaining from meat and dairy. They remove their shoes before entering a church. They circumcise their sons. Their churches contain a Holy of Holies, a sacred in a chamber called the Makdas, where a replica of the Ark of the Covenant, called the Tabot, is kept. Every Ethiopian Orthodox church has one. Every service revolves around it. The Beta Israel, the Ethiopian Jewish community, lived alongside Ethiopian Christians for centuries, sharing many of these same traditions. Their presence speaks to the deep and tangled roots that connect Ethiopia to the Holy Land, roots that run far deeper than colonial-era missionary work, roots that reach back to the ancient world, to Solomon and Sheba, to the Ark and the Covenant, to a time when the boundaries between Judaism and Christianity were not yet drawn. The monasteries of Ethiopia are another world entirely, perched on cliff tops and hidden in remote valleys, accessible only by rope ladder or narrow mountain path. They are among the most isolated religious communities on earth. Monks have lived in these places for 1,500 years, copying manuscripts, painting icons, praying through the seasons, maintaining a tradition of scholarship and devotion that has never been interrupted. Never, not by war, not by famine, not by revolution. The thread has never broken. The chain of prayer stretches back, link by link, generation by generation, to the 4th century, to the very beginning. It is this depth of faith, this absolute, unquestioning, bone-deep certainty that God is real and present and involved in the affairs of Ethiopia, that makes the churches of Lalibela comprehensible. You cannot understand why anyone would carve a church from solid rock unless you understand the faith that drove them. It was not architecture for the sake of architecture. It was not engineering for the sake of engineering. It was prayer, the most elaborate, the most committed, the most physically demanding prayer ever offered. And it was this connection, this deep, abiding, unbreakable bond between Ethiopia and Jerusalem that would give birth to the churches of Lalibela, because when a king dreamed of building a new holy city in the mountains of Ethiopia, he did not dream of something original. He dreamed of Jerusalem itself, transplanted, recreated, carved from the living rock of Africa. But that king has not yet been born, and the dynasty that would produce him has not yet risen. And so the story must travel back a little further, to the fall of one kingdom and the rise of another, in the highlands of what is now northern Ethiopia. Let the history settle around you like a blanket, soft, warm, unhurried. There is no test at the end of this, no facts you need to remember, just names and stories drifting through the dark, like the scent of eucalyptus on a highland breeze, present and then gone, and then present again. Let them come and go as they please. Your breathing is steady now, your body is heavy and warm, the pillow is soft beneath your head, the muscles of your face are relaxed, your jaw is unclenched, your tongue rests softly in your mouth, Your hands lie open on the covers or tucked against your body, wherever they are most comfortable. You are not holding on to anything. You are not gripping anything. You are open and soft and still. And the story continues, the way a river continues, finding its way around stones and through valleys, always moving, always carrying you forward towards sleep. The kingdom of Aksum was one of the great civilizations of the ancient world. At its height, from roughly the 1st century to the 7th century AD, it controlled a vast territory encompassing modern-day Ethiopia, Eritrea, and parts of Sudan and Yemen. It traded with Rome and India and Persia. It minted its own coins. It erected enormous stone obelisks, stelae, some of them over 20 meters tall, carved to resemble multi-story buildings. It was powerful and wealthy and cosmopolitan. But empires fall. They always fall, and sometime around the 7th or 8th century, weakened by the expansion of Islam which cut off its Red Sea trade routes, diminished by environmental changes and internal pressures, the Aksumite kingdom declined. The great city of Aksum faded. The trade routes dried up. The coins stopped being minted. And into the void stepped a new dynasty, the Zagwe. The Zagwe were not Aksumites. They came from a different ethnic group, the Agor people of the Central Highlands. Their rise to power is poorly documented. The records of medieval Ethiopia are sparse and fragmentary, but by the 10th or 11th century, they controlled the heart of the Ethiopian Highlands. They moved the center of power southward from Aksum to a region called Lasta, high in the mountains, remote and defensible and cold. It was here, in the town that would eventually bear his name, that the greatest of the Zagwe kings was born. The town itself sits on a high plateau, surrounded by rugged mountains on all sides. The landscape is dramatic. Sheer escarpments drop away into deep river valleys. Rocky peaks rise against the sky like the teeth of some enormous creature. The air is cool and thin. The nights are cold. Frost sometimes glitters on the red earth in the early mornings. It is a hard landscape, a demanding landscape, a landscape that breeds toughness and endurance and a particular kind of stubborn, unwavering faith. The people who lived here were farmers and herdsmen, growing teff and barley on the terraced hillsides, grazing cattle in the highland meadows. They were not wealthy by the standards of the great trading empires, but they were devout, and they were skilled with their hands, and they had iron, and they had rock, endless, inexhaustible, patient rock, waiting beneath the thin soil of the plateau, waiting to be shaped. His name was Jeba Meskel Lalibela, and even his birth was wrapped in legend. The story goes that when the infant Lalibela entered the world, a great swarm of bees descended upon him. They covered his body, they crawled across his skin, they surrounded him in a humming golden cloud, but they did not sting him, not once. His mother, seeing this miraculous sign, named him Lalibela, which in the Agor language means the bees recognized his sovereignty. It was a prophetic name. The bees had seen what human eyes could not yet perceive. This child would be king. This child would build something that would endure for 1,000 years. But the path to kingship was not smooth. Lalibela had an older brother, Harbay, who was the reigning king, and Harbay feared the prophecy. He feared the bees and what they signified. He feared the growing reputation of his younger brother, the whispers that Lalibela was destined for the throne, and so, as brothers in power so often do, he tried to eliminate the threat. Harbay poisoned Lalibela. The method is lost to history. The Kebra Nagast and other Ethiopian sources do not specify the substance. What they specify is the intent. Harbay wanted his brother dead. He wanted the prophecy silenced. He wanted the bees and their golden humming promise to be proved wrong. The poison did not kill him. Instead, it sent him into a deep, death-like sleep, a coma that lasted 3 days. And during those 3 days, while his body lay motionless and his breathing was so shallow that those who watched him thought him dead, Lalibela's spirit was taken up to heaven. What he saw there changed everything. God showed him a city of churches, not churches built from blocks of stone and timber and mortar, not churches assembled piece by piece upon the surface of the earth, but churches carved downward into the rock, churches revealed from the stone the way truth is revealed from darkness, churches that were part of the mountain itself, inseparable from it, as permanent and as patient as the earth that held them. God spoke to him, "Build this, build what I have shown you, build a new Jerusalem here in the mountains of Ethiopia, build it for your people who cannot make the long and dangerous journey to the Holy Land. Bring Jerusalem to them." When Lalibela awoke from his 3-day sleep, he knew what he had to do. The vision burned in him like a coal. He had seen the churches. He had walked their stone corridors. He had touched their carved walls. He knew their proportions and their shapes and their relationships to one another. God had shown him everything, every detail, every measurement, every cross and column and doorway. But the path from vision to reality was not yet clear. Harbay still ruled, and Lalibela, the younger brother, the one the bees had chosen, was not yet king. The years that followed are shrouded in the fog of medieval Ethiopian history. What is known is that eventually, through a combination of political negotiation and divine intervention, depending on which account you read, Harbay stepped aside. Some traditions say he abdicated peacefully, having been shown a sign that convinced him his brother's destiny was genuine. Others suggest a less voluntary transfer of power. What matters is the result. Lalibela became king, and the carving could begin. But first, he went to Jerusalem himself. He made the pilgrimage. He walked the streets of the holy city. He visited the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. He stood on Golgotha. He waded in the river Jordan. He studied the sacred geography of the city, the way the churches and shrines and holy places were arranged, the way the landscape itself told the story of Christ's life and death and resurrection. And then he returned to Ethiopia, to the Highlands, to the red earth and the thin air and the eucalyptus-scented mornings. He carried Jerusalem in his heart. He carried its map in his mind, the Kidron Valley, the Mount of Olives, the Via Dolorosa, the River Jordan. He would recreate them all. He would build a complete model of the Holy Land, compressed and concentrated and carved from the volcanic rock of the Ethiopian highlands, so that his people would never need to make the dangerous journey across the deserts and seas to Palestine. Jerusalem would come to them. And he began to build, or rather, he began to carve. The scope of what Lalibela attempted is almost impossible to comprehend. He was not proposing to build a single church. He was proposing to carve an entire sacred city from the mountain. 11 churches, connected by tunnels and trenches, arranged to mirror the geography of Jerusalem, complete with a river Jordan, a Mount Calvary, a tomb of Adam, all of it carved downward from the surface, all of it hewn from the living rock. It was the most ambitious architectural project in the history of East Africa, perhaps the most ambitious carving project in the history of the world. How do you carve a church downward from the surface of the earth? This is the question that stops you. This is the question that makes you stand at the edge of one of these trenches and stare down at the building below you and feel something shift in your understanding of what human beings are capable of. Because you have seen great buildings before. You have marveled at cathedrals and pyramids and temples and towers, but all of those were built upward, stone upon stone, brick upon brick, layer upon layer. The logic of construction is the logic of accumulation, of adding, of piling one thing on top of another until the structure reaches the sky. Lalibela is the opposite. Lalibela is subtraction. Lalibela is the logic of removal, of taking away, of finding the church that was always hidden inside the mountain and setting it free. The process began at the top. Workers stood on the surface of the rock, on flat, unremarkable ground that looked like any other patch of Highland Plateau, and they began to cut. They cut trenches, deep vertical trenches, straight down into the volcanic tuff. They cut on all four sides of a massive rectangular block, isolating it from the surrounding bedrock. Imagine cutting a giant brick out of the earth, but leaving it in place. That is what they did. They carved away the rock around it until a great monolith stood free. A block of stone, perhaps 30 meters long and 20 meters wide and 12 meters tall, surrounded on all sides by narrow trenches that dropped straight down into the earth. And then came the truly extraordinary part. They hollowed it out. Working from the top down and from the outside in, the carvers began to remove the interior of the monolith. They carved rooms, they carved corridors, they carved columns, leaving pillars of stone standing where the rock had been cut away around them. They carved arches. They carved window openings that let light filter into the interior. They carved doorways. They carved decorative moldings and relief carvings and crosses and geometric patterns, all of it from the same single piece of rock. All of it connected, all of it ones. There is no margin for error. This is perhaps the most terrifying aspect of the entire enterprise. When you build a conventional building and make a mistake, you can remove the offending stone and replace it with a new one. When you carve a monolithic church and make a mistake, the mistake is permanent. You cannot add stone back. You cannot fill a gap. You cannot undo a cut that has gone too deep or too wide. Every stroke of the chisel is final. Every decision is irreversible. The entire building must be planned in advance. Every room, every column, every window, every decorative detail, and then executed with a precision that allows for no corrections. One miscalculation in the early stages, one trench cut a meter too far to the left, and the entire church is ruined, not merely damaged, ruined, because you cannot start over. The rock is what it is. You get one chance. The carvers of Lalibela did not waste their chance. Not once, not in 11 churches. No mortar, no joints, no seams where one block of stone meets another, because there are no blocks. There is only the mountain. The church is the mountain. The mountain is the church. They are the same thing, separated only by the intention of the carvers, who decided which stone would stay and which would go, who saw the building inside the rock and removed everything that was not the building. Think about the courage this required. The carvers could not see the finished building as they worked. They could not step back and assess the whole. They were inside it, surrounded by it, working in dim light and confined spaces, chipping away at rock that pressed in on all sides. They had to hold the completed church in their minds, a three-dimensional model of extraordinary complexity, and work towards it one chisel stroke at a time. It was an act of faith as much as an act of engineering. Faith in the plan, faith in their skills, faith in the God who had commanded the building. The rock itself cooperated. The volcanic tuff of the Ethiopian Highlands, formed from compacted volcanic ash laid down millions of years ago, has a remarkable property. When it is freshly exposed, when it has just been cut or carved, it is relatively soft, workable. A skilled craftsman with a sharp iron chisel can carve it with precision and control. But once it has been exposed to the air for a period of time, it hardens, it oxidizes. It becomes dense and durable and resistant to weathering. The stone does the builder's work for them, starting soft for the carving and then hardening to protect the finished surface. Ethiopia had iron. This is important. While many ancient civilizations were still working with bronze or stone tools, Ethiopia had been smelting iron for centuries. The carvers of Lalibela had iron chisels, iron hammers, iron picks and wedges and pry bars. They had the technology to work stone with precision, to make clean cuts and smooth surfaces and fine details. The iron did not make the work easy. Nothing about carving a church from solid rock is easy, but it made it possible. And they thought about water. This is perhaps the most quietly impressive aspect of the engineering. Water is the enemy of carved stone. It seeps into cracks. It freezes and expands. It erodes surfaces. It carries biological agents that colonize stone and break it down. If you carve a church 12 meters below ground level and do nothing about drainage, water will fill it like a swimming pool during the rainy season and destroy it within decades. The builders of Lalibela solved this problem with an elegance that modern engineers admire. They carved drainage channels into the rock, gutters and conduits and subtle inclines that direct rainwater away from the churches and into the surrounding trenches, which themselves drain into channels that carry the water away from the site entirely. Some of these drainage features are hidden, carved inside the walls, invisible from the surface. They are the plumbing of genius, 800 years later. They still work. Consider the sheer volume of stone that had to be removed. For a church like Medhane Alem, the largest of the 11, the carvers had to excavate roughly 15,000 cubic meters of rock. That is thousands of tons of material. Every kilogram of it had to be cut from the monolith and carried away, up out of the deepening trench, along narrow paths, to wherever the spoil was dumped. Some of it was used to build retaining walls around the trenches. Some was carried further away. But all of it had to be moved by hand, by human muscle and will, and the slow, grinding, day after day labor of people who believed they were doing God's work. The tools would have worn out constantly. Iron chisels blunt quickly against stone, even relatively soft volcanic tuff. A team of blacksmiths must have worked alongside the carvers, reforging and resharpening the chisels, keeping the cutting edges keen, feeding the furnaces with charcoal from the highland forests. The sound of hammers on iron and iron on stone must have echoed through these valleys for years, decades. The sound of creation, the sound of the mountain giving up its secrets. The precision of the carving is extraordinary. Stand inside one of these churches and look up at the ceiling. You will see coffers, recessed panels arranged in geometric patterns. You will see carved crosses, dozens of different cross designs, each one unique, each one perfect. You will see columns with capitals and bases, load-bearing elements that are purely decorative because the church does not need them. The roof is the same continuous piece of rock as the walls and the floor. The columns could be removed and the church would stand, but they are there because a church should have columns, because beauty matters, because the carvers were not merely engineers, they were artists, they were worshippers, they were building a house for God. Take another breath now, a slow one. Let it come in like the dawn light, gradually, filling you gently from the inside. And let it go like the sound of chanting fading into the distance. slowly, softly, until there is nothing left but silence and warmth. You are doing beautifully. Your body knows how to do this. Your body knows how to let go, how to soften, how to sink into the mattress and the pillow and the warm, dark, comfortable space of sleep. Trust it. Let it lead you. The story is here. The story will continue. You do not need to hold on to it. Just let it wash over you like water over stone, smoothing everything, gentling everything, wearing away the rough edges of the day until only softness remains. There are 11 churches at Lalibela. 11, each one carved from the living rock, each one unique, each one still standing after 8 centuries of rain and sun and wind and earthquake and the slow, patient work of time. They are arranged in 3 groups, with one glorious exception that stands alone, and the geography of their arrangement is not accidental. It mirrors the sacred geography of Jerusalem itself. There is a river that runs between 2 of the groups, and it is called the River Jordan. There is a hill called Calvary. There is a tomb. The entire site is a map of the Holy Land, rendered in Ethiopian stone, a pilgrim's guide for those who could never make the journey to Palestine. The northern group is where you begin, and the first church you encounter is the largest monolithic church in the world. Medhane Alem, the house of the Savior of the world. It rises from its trench like a great stone ship run aground in the Ethiopian Highlands, 33 meters long, 23 meters wide, 11.5 meters tall, surrounded on all sides by massive columns, 72 of them in total, carved from the same rock as the church itself, standing in rows like a petrified forest. The design is said to be modeled on the original church of St. Mary of Zion in Aksum, the holiest church in Ethiopian Christendom, which tradition holds was the first resting place of the Ark of the Covenant when Menelik brought it from Jerusalem. That original church is long gone, destroyed and rebuilt several times over the centuries, but its memory lives on in Medhane Alem, preserved in stone, a copy that has outlasted the original by half a millennium and more. Walk around it, take your time, let your hand trail along the outer wall of the trench, feel the stone under your fingertips, cool and slightly rough, with a grain that catches your skin like very fine sandpaper. The columns are enormous up close. Each one is a cylinder of stone left standing when everything around it was removed. Think about that. Each column is a negative space in reverse. It exists not because someone placed it there, but because someone chose not to remove it. Each column is an act of preservation amidst destruction, a decision to spare, and the decisions were perfect. Every column is precisely placed, precisely proportioned, precisely spaced. The mind that designed this building and the hands that carved it were working in perfect concert. The interior is vast and austere, 3 aisles divided by 2 rows of massive rectangular pillars. The ceiling is high. The light filters in through windows cut high in the walls, creating patterns of illumination that move across the stone floor as the sun traverses the sky. The effect is not unlike a Romanesque church in southern France or northern Spain, and yet it is entirely different. The proportions are different. The feeling is different. The weight of the rock above you is different. In a European church, you look up and see a ceiling. In Medhane Alem, you look up and see the mountain. The acoustics are remarkable. Sound behaves differently in a monolithic space than in a constructed one. There are no joints for sound to escape through, no gaps between stones. The rock is continuous, and sound bounces off it cleanly, without the diffusion that occurs in a building made of many separate pieces. A voice raised in this space carries with an extraordinary clarity and resonance. When the priests chant here, the sound seems to come from everywhere at once, from the walls, from the floor, from the mountain itself, as though the rock was singing along. Some of the exterior columns have fallen over the centuries, weakened by erosion and by the penetration of water into tiny cracks. Protective shelters have been erected over several of the churches, controversial modern additions that some argue detract from the aesthetic purity of the site, but that are necessary to prevent further deterioration. The balance between preservation and authenticity is delicate. The churches were carved to stand in the open air, exposed to sun and rain and the Highland winds. But 800 years of exposure have taken their toll, and the question of how to protect them without diminishing them is one that conservators continue to debate. Adjacent to this great church, connected by trenches and passages carved through the rock, is Bet Maryam, the House of Mary. It is smaller than Bet Medhane Alem, but it is far more decorated. If Medhane Alem is a statement of power, Maryam is a declaration of love. The exterior is covered in carved ornamentation, blind windows, decorative friezes, crosses in dozens of different patterns, Greek crosses and Latin crosses, and the distinctive Ethiopian cross with its elaborate interlaced design. The walls are articulated with pilasters and cornices and moldings that create patterns of light and shadow on the stone surface. A stone embroidery of extraordinary intricacy. Inside, there are frescoes painted directly onto the rock walls and ceilings, images of saints and angels and biblical scenes rendered in the vivid colors of the Ethiopian artistic tradition. The Virgin Mary holding the infant Christ, the mounted saints, George and Mercurios and Theodoros, on their war horses, geometric patterns that echo the carved crosses on the exterior. Some of the paintings are original, dating to the time of Lalibela himself. Others have been added over the centuries, layer upon layer of devotion, each generation adding its own voice to the conversation between this church and its God. In the courtyard of Bet Maryam, there is a pillar. It stands wrapped in cloth, permanently covered, and has been for as long as anyone can remember. Legend says that King Lalibela himself touched this pillar and had a vision of the past and future of the world. The visions were inscribed on the pillar's surface, but the knowledge they contain is too powerful for human eyes, and so the pillar remains covered, its secrets kept, its knowledge sleeping in the stone. Deeper into the northern group, through narrow passages where the rock walls press close on either side and the sky is reduced to a thin blue ribbon above your head, you find Bet Golgotha, the House of Golgotha, named for the hill in Jerusalem where Christ was crucified. This church is unique among the 11 because it contains what is said to be the tomb of King Lalibela himself. The tomb is simple, a carved recess in the rock wall, unremarkable in itself, but the reverence that surrounds it is palpable. Priests guard it, pilgrims kneel before it. Lalibela is a saint in the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, canonized for his great work of building these churches, and here, in the church he named for the place of Christ's sacrifice, his body rests. If the tradition is true, and in Ethiopia tradition is truth, then the bones of the man who dreamed these churches into being lie within the rock from which they were carved. He has become part of his own creation, inseparable from the stone, permanent. Nearby are Bet Mikhael and Bet Denagel, the house of the Archangel Michael and the house of the Virgins. They are connected to Golgotha by passages and courtyards, a labyrinth of sacred spaces carved from the mountain, each one flowing into the next, each one a room in a house that has no end. Bet Mikhael, also called Bet Debasina, the house of Mount Sinai, shares a wall with Bet Golgotha. The two churches are connected internally. A doorway carved through the shared rock wall allows passage between them. The symbolism is powerful. Sinai and Golgotha, the mountain where Moses received the law and the hill where Christ fulfilled it. The Old Testament and the New, side by side, carved from the same stone, inseparable. Bedtime is dedicated to the virgin martyrs of the early church, the women who gave their lives for their faith in the persecutions of the Roman era. It is a smaller church, more intimate, with lower ceilings and a feeling of enclosure that is almost womb-like. The light inside is dim, the air is cool and still. Pilgrims come here to pray for the intercession of the martyrs, and the walls are darkened by centuries of candle smoke and the brush of countless hands touching the stone in reverence. The eastern group lies across the river Jordan, a narrow channel of water, sometimes a trickle, sometimes a stream, depending on the season, that runs through a carved trench between the two clusters of churches. The symbolism is deliberate. To move from the northern group to the eastern group, you must cross the Jordan. You must pass from one world into another, from one testament into the next. The eastern group contains 4 churches, and among them is what many scholars consider the finest rock-hewn structure in the world. Bet Emanuel, the House of Emanuel. It stands in its trench like a jewel in a velvet-lined box, and the first thing you notice is the walls. They are not flat, they are not plain, they are articulated with a system of projecting and receding bands, horizontal layers that create a pattern of light and shadow across the entire exterior surface. The effect is extraordinary. It resembles the layered construction technique of Aksumite architecture, the ancient building style of the kingdom of Aksum, where alternating layers of stone and timber created a distinctive striped appearance. But here there is no timber, there are no layers, there is only stone, carved to look as though it were built from layers. The carvers of Bet Emanuel did not merely create a church, they created a representation of a church, a trompe l'oeil in stone, a carving of a building that looks like it was built, but was carved. It is a hall of mirrors, a meditation on the nature of construction itself. The interior is equally remarkable. The walls are articulated with the same layered technique. The ceiling is carved with elaborate geometric patterns. The proportions are elegant and precise. Every surface has been finished with a care and attention that speaks of unlimited patience, of carvers who understood that they were doing the work of God, and that God deserved their very best. The nave is narrow and tall, creating a sense of vertical aspiration that draws your eye upward. The light enters through carefully placed windows and moves across the interior in slow golden shafts, illuminating first one carved detail and then another, as though the building were conducting a tour of its own beauty. Here, a perfect Aksumite molding. There, a window frame of extraordinary precision. And everywhere, the warm, honey-colored stone that seems to glow from within. As though the rock remembers the sunlight it absorbed 1,000,000 years ago when it was still ash falling from a volcanic sky. Across the courtyard from Bet Emanuel stands Bet Mercurios, the House of Mercury, named for the warrior Saint Mercurios, who is venerated in the Ethiopian church. This church is different from the others. Its plan is less regular. Its layout is asymmetric. Its internal spaces feel improvised, organic, as though they grew rather than were designed. Some scholars believe that Bet Mercurios may predate King Lalibela. They suggest it was originally a secular building, perhaps a prison or a royal court, that was later converted into a church. The evidence is in the architecture. The earliest carvings in Mercurios do not resemble the work found in the other Lalibela churches. They belong to an earlier tradition, an older hand. This church may have been ancient already when Lalibela carved the rest. He may have found it, recognized it, and brought it into his sacred geography. Inside Bet Mercurios there are remarkable frescoes, paintings of the three wise men, paintings of angels with enormous staring eyes, the distinctive Ethiopic style that makes every sacred figure look as though it is gazing directly into your soul. The paintings are faded now, dimmed by centuries of candle smoke and incense and the gentle, relentless assault of time, but they are still there, still watching, still bearing witness. Bet Abba Libanos, the house of Abba Libanos, is perhaps the strangest of the 11 churches. It is not fully detached from the surrounding rock. The walls are freestanding, carved away from the bedrock on all sides. The floor is separate, but the roof is still attached, still connected to the cliff face behind it. The church hangs from the rock like a pendant from a chain. The legend says that Bet Abba Libanos was built by Lalibela's wife, Keba Maskell, in a single night with the help of angels while the king slept. The angels descended and carved the church from the rock in the hours between dusk and dawn. When Lalibela awoke and saw what had been accomplished, he understood that his wife's devotion was as great as his own. It is a beautiful legend, and perhaps, like all the best legends, it contains a truth that facts alone cannot capture. The truth that what was built at Lalibela was not the work of one man, it was the work of a community, a faith, a civilization. The king may have dreamed the vision, but it took thousands of hands to make it real. And then there is Bet Gabriel-Rufael, the house of the archangels Gabriel and Raphael. This is the most imposing of the Eastern group, perhaps the most imposing of all 11 churches. Its facade rises from the trench floor like a fortress wall, sheer and massive and unadorned. There are no decorative carvings here, no delicate moldings, no Aksumite layering, just rock, sheer, vertical, intimidating rock. The entrance is reached by a narrow walkway that bridges a deep crevasse in the rock. You must cross this bridge to enter. You must commit to crossing. The drop below is real. The message is clear. This is not a place you wander into casually. This is a threshold, a boundary between the ordinary world and the sacred one. Some scholars believe that Bet Gabriel-Rufael may have served a secular purpose before its consecration as a church, a royal residence perhaps, or a fortress, or a hall of audience where the Zagwe kings received emissaries and dispensed justice. Its military bearing supports this theory. The sheer, undecorated walls, the narrow, easily defended entrance, the commanding position at the edge of the trench. This was a building designed to impress and to intimidate, to project power. But whatever it was before, it is a church now, and it has been a church for 800 years. And the archangels whose names it bears, Gabriel the messenger and Raphael the healer, stand guard over it in the invisible realm, as the rock walls stand guard in the physical one. Power has been transmuted into piety. Fortress has become sanctuary. The same stone that once projected earthly authority now radiates heavenly peace. You are settling deeper now. You can feel it. The weight of your body pressing into the mattress, the warmth of the covers around you, the way your thoughts have slowed, grown softer, less urgent, less insistent. They drift now like clouds across a highland sky, present but unthreatening, shapeless and gentle and easily ignored. This is good. This is exactly where you need to be, not asleep yet, but close, in the borderland, in the space between waking and dreaming where the world grows soft and the edges of things blur and the difference between here and there, between now and then, between you and the story, begins to dissolve. Stay here, rest here. The story will find you, it always does. But we have not yet spoken of the jewel, the crown, the most famous of all, the church that stands alone, apart from the northern group and the eastern group, in a class entirely by itself. Bet Giyorgis, the house of St. George. You approach it across flat ground. There is nothing to suggest what lies ahead. The path is unremarkable: red earth, scrubby grass, a few eucalyptus trees casting their narrow shadows. You could be walking anywhere in the Ethiopian Highlands. The ground beneath your feet is solid and ordinary and gives no hint of what it conceals. And then the earth opens. It happens suddenly. One moment you are walking on level ground, the next, the ground drops away before you, a trench, a chasm, 12 meters deep, cut straight down through the volcanic tuff with the precision of a surgeon's incision. The walls of the trench are smooth and vertical. At the bottom, water sometimes pools after rain, reflecting the sky like a dark mirror. And rising from the floor of this trench, growing out of the living rock like a geometric flower, is the most perfect building you have ever seen. It is a cross, a Greek cross, with 4 arms of equal length, carved from a single piece of stone. The roof is level with the surrounding ground from above, and this is how most people first see it. Bet Giyorgis is a cross-shaped platform set into the earth. 3 nested crosses, actually, one inside the other, carved in relief on the roof surface. They seem to float. They seem to hover above the void. They are the most photographed architectural detail in Ethiopia, and possibly in all of Africa. But the roof is not the building. The building is below, 12 meters of it, dropping down into the earth like a revelation, like a truth too important to be left on the surface, like something that needed to be hidden in the rock and found, discovered, earned. The legend of Bet Giyorgis is the most beloved of all the Lalibela legends. King Lalibela had completed 10 churches, 10 extraordinary, impossible, world-changing churches carved from the living rock. He surveyed his work. He must have been satisfied. He must have felt that the vision God had shown him in heaven was now made real on earth. But then Saint George appeared to him. The warrior saint rode up on a white horse. His armor gleamed, his spear was bright, and he was not pleased. He looked at the 10 churches and he asked the king a question. "Where is mine? You have built churches for the Savior and for Mary and for the angels and for the martyrs, but you have not built one for me. George, the dragon slayer, the patron of Ethiopia, you have forgotten me." Lalibela was stricken. He had not forgotten George. He had simply not yet built his church. And so he promised the saint that the last church would be his, and that it would be the finest of all. The hoofprints of St. George's horse can still be seen, so the priests will tell you, carved into the rock at the approach to Bet Giyorgis, circular depressions in the stone, whether they were carved by human hands or by heavenly hooves, they are there. The story is in the rock. The rock remembers. It is a story of love and pride and holy competition. George wanted to be remembered, and Lalibela, good king, faithful servant, master carver, gave him the finest memorial in all of Christendom. Not a painting, not a statue, not a church built from bricks and beams that would eventually crumble. A church carved from the mountain. A church that is the mountain. A church that will endure as long as the Ethiopian highlands endure, which is to say, forever. The descent to Bet Giyorgis is an experience unlike any other in architecture. You enter through a narrow trench that curves around and downward, the rock walls rising above you as you descend, the sky shrinking to a narrow slot overhead. The temperature drops, the sound changes, the world above, the world of sunlight and wind and open air, recedes. You are entering the earth. You are going down into the rock, and with each step, the church grows larger above you. And then you turn a corner, and you are there, standing at the base of the trench, looking up at the walls of Giyorgis. They are flawless. The stone is smooth and warm to the touch, the color of honey in some lights, rose pink in others, depending on the time of day and the angle of the sun. The walls rise above you in 3 tiers, each tier slightly recessed from the one below it, creating a stepped profile that gives the building a sense of upward movement, of aspiration, even though it was carved downward. The windows are arranged in regular rows, simple rectangular openings with decorative frames. The whole composition is one of extraordinary harmony. Every proportion is balanced. Every element is in conversation with every other element. Nothing is superfluous. Nothing is missing. The drainage is particularly elegant here. The carvers cut channels into the rock around the base of the church, directing rainwater into a system of tunnels that carry it away from the foundations. They carved a small pool near the entrance, a baptismal font filled by rainwater, a sacred pool that is part of the church's liturgical life. Even the practical elements are beautiful. Even the plumbing is holy. Step inside. The doorway is low. You must bow your head to enter. This is not accidental. In Ethiopian Orthodox tradition, you bow before God. The architecture enforces humility. The building will not let you enter upright. You must lower yourself. You must make yourself small. And then, once you are inside, you can straighten, you can look up. And what you see is a space of austere and perfect beauty. The interior of Giyorgis is simple, cruciform in plan, as the exterior would suggest, with 4 short arms meeting at a central space. The ceiling is carved with a large relief cross. The walls are plain. There are no frescoes here, no elaborate decorations, just stone, clean, warm, finely finished stone. The light enters through the windows and falls in bright rectangles on the floor, moving slowly across the surface as the hours pass. A sundial of sacred light. There is a stillness inside Giyorgis that is difficult to describe. It is not merely the absence of sound. It is a presence, a positive quality, as though the rock itself is generating silence, the way a fire generates heat. You can feel it on your skin. You can feel it in your chest. It presses gently against you from all sides, not confining but embracing. The silence of a place that has been prayed in for 800 years. The silence of stone that has absorbed 8 centuries of worship and song and whispered devotion and holds it all. Still, quiet, safe. Time moves differently inside Giyorgis. You become aware of this gradually. The rectangles of light on the floor shift with an almost imperceptible slowness, sliding across the stone as the sun moves overhead. You watch them. You watch their slow migration and you realize that you have been standing here for 20 minutes. Or is it an hour? It is impossible to tell. The church has its own time. A time measured not in minutes and hours, but in centuries and millennia, in the slow erosion of stone. In the gradual darkening of surfaces exposed to incense smoke, in the almost imperceptible wearing of the floor beneath generations of bare feet. You are inside a clock that runs on geological time, and your own time, your hurried, anxious, tightly scheduled modern time, simply ceases to apply. This is why people come here, not only for the architecture, not only for the history, but for this feeling, this suspension, this stepping outside of time, in a world that moves faster and faster, that demands more and more, that never stops and never rests and never allows a moment of true stillness, Bet Giyorgis offers something increasingly rare. It offers permission to stop, to be still, to simply stand in a stone room and breathe and let the silence do its ancient healing work. But these 11 churches do not stand in isolation. They are connected, woven together by a labyrinthine network of trenches and tunnels and narrow passages that thread through the rock like veins through a body. To walk through Lalibela is to enter a maze, a sacred maze, a maze with no dead ends but many surprises. Some of the passages are wide enough to walk through comfortably, trenches open to the sky with rough rock walls rising on either side, and the blue Ethiopian sky floating above you like a river of light. You walk through these trenches and you feel the weight of the rock on either side, the mass of the mountain pressing in, and yet you do not feel oppressed. You feel held, contained, safe. Other passages are narrow, very narrow, so narrow that you must turn sideways to pass through. Your shoulders brush the rock on both sides. The walls are close enough to touch without extending your arms. The stone is cool against your back, cool against your chest. You are inside the mountain now. You are passing through the body of the earth, and the earth is letting you through, grudgingly perhaps, but letting you through. And then there are places where the trenches open into small courtyards, unexpected spaces where the rock has been carved back to create a clearing, a patch of sky above, a tree growing from the stone floor, its roots somehow finding purchase in the cracks, its branches reaching up towards the light. These courtyards are resting places, pausing places, places where pilgrims stop and catch their breath and look up at the sky and remember that there is a world above. A world of air and light and open space before they plunge back into the stone labyrinth. Some passages are tunnels, true tunnels, roofed in rock, dark, pitch dark in places, where the only light is the faint gray glow from the entrance behind you or the exit ahead. You walk through these tunnels with your hands outstretched, feeling the walls, feeling the rough carved stone beneath your fingertips. Your footsteps echo. The sound bounces off the rock and comes back to you changed, multiplied, as though other footsteps are walking alongside you in the darkness. Pilgrims who walked this way centuries ago, priests who passed through these tunnels before dawn, carrying candles, chanting prayers, their voices filling the stone corridors with ancient melody. There is a particular tunnel that connects the northern and eastern groups, a passage that runs beneath the river Jordan. It is long and narrow and completely dark. You enter it and the light vanishes, absolutely vanishes. The darkness is total. Your eyes strain to find something, anything to focus on, but there is nothing, just blackness, and the sound of your own breathing, and the feel of the stone under your fingertips, and the knowledge that you are walking beneath a river, beneath the symbolic Jordan. Passing from one spiritual realm to another, through a darkness that is not merely physical but metaphorical. You are passing through death, through the tomb, through the 3 days that Lalibela himself spent in his death-like sleep, and when you emerge on the other side, blinking in the sudden Ethiopian sunlight, you have been changed. You have crossed over. The darkness has done its work. The tunnel system serves a practical purpose. It connects the churches to one another. It provides sheltered passage during the rainy season. It allows priests to move between churches without returning to the surface. But it also serves a spiritual purpose. The experience of walking through darkness, of being enclosed in rock, of losing your sense of direction and your sense of time, is a form of pilgrimage in itself. You enter the tunnels and you leave the ordinary world behind. You emerge in a different place, a sacred place, and the journey through the dark has prepared you for what you find there. In some places, the tunnels open into cavities that may once have been hermit cells, small, low-ceilinged chambers carved into the rock beside the main passages, a space just large enough for a person to sit cross-legged, a shelf carved into the wall for a manuscript or a candle, a niche for a small icon. Monks may have lived in these cells, spending their days in prayer and meditation in the darkness of the rock, emerging only for services in the main churches. The austerity of such a life is almost impossible to imagine, but for men and women who believed that this rock was shaped by divine command, there could be no holier place to dwell, no closer approach to God than to sit inside his handiwork and breathe. The River Jordan flows through a carved channel between the northern and eastern groups. It is a modest stream, fed by springs and rainwater, but its significance is immense. Pilgrims who cannot travel to the Holy Land can come here instead. They can wade across the Jordan. They can stand where the water runs and feel the same symbolic weight that a pilgrim in Palestine would feel. The geography of salvation, the landscape of the Bible, has been recreated in stone and water in the highlands of Ethiopia. Every step through Lalibela is a step through the Holy Land. Every trench is a valley in Judea. Every church is a station on the road to redemption. Let yourself drift now. Let the image of the tunnels hold you, the cool stone against your hands, the darkness wrapping around you like a blanket, the sound of water somewhere in the distance, a gentle trickling, the River Jordan finding its way through the carved channels. There is no urgency here, no destination, just the slow, unhurried experience of moving through the earth, of being held by the rock, of letting the mountain carry you the way the story carries you, deeper and deeper, and gently deeper still. Your eyelids are heavy. That is good. Let them be heavy. Let them close if they wish. The story does not need your eyes. It needs only your ears, and even those can rest soon. The words will find you. They will seep into you the way water seeps into stone, slowly, gently, finding every crack and hollow and empty space, and filling it with warmth, with calm, with the ancient, patient, unshakable peace of a place that has been holy for 800 years. What makes Lalibela truly extraordinary is not merely that these churches exist. It is that they are alive. In most of the world, medieval buildings are museums. They are heritage sites. They are protected and preserved and studied and admired, but they are not used. Notre Dame de Paris holds occasional services, but it is primarily a tourist attraction. The Colosseum in Rome is a ruin. The pyramids of Egypt are tombs with no one left to bury. But the churches of Lalibela are churches, real churches, active churches. Every single one of them is still in daily use, exactly as they were 800 years ago. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church did not abandon them. It did not move on to newer, more convenient buildings. It stayed. It has always stayed. The churches of Lalibela are the parish churches of Lalibela. The local congregation worships in them. Babies are baptized in them. Marriages are blessed in them. The dead are mourned in them. The great festivals of the Christian year are celebrated in them with an intensity and a beauty that takes your breath away. This continuity is almost unique in the world of ancient architecture. 800 years of unbroken use, 800 years of daily services, 800 years of candles lit and prayers offered and incense burned and psalms chanted in the same stone spaces by generation after generation of the faithful. The churches have never been abandoned. They have never been desecrated. They have never been converted to some other use. They have never fallen into ruin. They have been churches from the moment they were completed, and they are churches still. The same God is worshipped here, The same liturgy is performed. The same language is used in prayer. The thread is unbroken, and that unbroken thread, that continuity of devotion stretching across 8 centuries, is itself a kind of miracle, as remarkable in its way as the carving. Before dawn, every dawn, the priests come. They walk through the tunnels in the darkness. They enter the churches by candlelight. They are dressed in white, long white robes and white turbans, and they carry staffs and prayer sticks and hand crosses made of wood or metal. They arrange themselves in the dimness of the rock-hewn nave, and they begin to chant. The chanting is extraordinary. It follows a system called Zema, the sacred music of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, which tradition says was revealed to Saint Yed in the 6th century by 3 heavenly birds. It is not like Western plain chant. It is not like Byzantine chant. It is entirely its own thing. The melodies are modal and repetitive, rising and falling in patterns that cycle and return and cycle again. The rhythms are complex, punctuated by the stamp of prayer sticks on the stone floor and the shaking of sistra, metal rattles that create a shimmering, insistent percussion. The overall effect is hypnotic, mesmerizing. The sound fills the rock-hewn space and bounces off the walls and multiplies and overlaps until you cannot tell where one voice ends and another begins. It becomes a single sound, a vibration, a frequency that resonates with the stone itself, as though the church were a tuning fork and the chanting had found its note. The priests chant for hours. They chant before dawn and after dawn and into the morning. They chant the Psalms of David. They chant the prayers of the liturgy. They chant in Giyorgis, the ancient language, the language that Christ himself might have understood. For Giyorgis is a Semitic language, cousin to Aramaic, cousin to the language spoken in the Holy Land 2,000 years ago. Outside the churches, as the dawn brightens, you will see pilgrims. They come from the town and from the countryside and from far beyond. Some have walked for days, some are old, bent and slow, leaning on walking sticks, their white robes dusty from the road. Some are young mothers carrying infants wrapped in cotton against their backs. Some are children, wide-eyed and quiet, holding their parents' hands. They remove their shoes at the entrance to the church compound. They bow. They cross themselves 3 times. In the Ethiopian manner, touching forehead, chest, and each shoulder. And then they enter, barefoot on the cold stone, barefoot on the floors that Lalibela's carvers smoothed 800 years ago. They lean against the walls. They press their foreheads to the stone. They kiss the rock. You will see this if you come to Lalibela at dawn, the faithful pressing their lips to the walls of the churches. It is not a gesture of superstition. It is a gesture of love. They are touching the sacred. They are making contact, physical, bodily, undeniable contact, with something they believe was shaped by God's instruction. The stone is not merely stone. It is a letter from heaven, and they are reading it with their lips. The churches hold their treasures still. Wooden doors carved with geometric patterns, ancient manuscripts written on goatskin parchment, the pages yellowed and brittle, but the Giyorgis script still legible, still beautiful, painted icons on wood panels, the faces of saints with their enormous, all-seeing eyes, processional crosses of brass and silver and iron, each one a unique design. Each one a meditation on the infinite variations that can be drawn from the simple shape of 2 intersecting lines. And in the innermost chamber of each church, the Makdas, the Holy of Holies, rests the Tabot, the replica of the tablets of the law, the symbolic presence of the Ark of the Covenant. No one may see it except the priest who guards it. No one may photograph it. No one may touch it. It is wrapped in cloth and kept in darkness and prayed over in languages that were old when Europe was young. The greatest festival at Lalibela is Timkat, Ethiopian Epiphany. It falls in January, in the Ethiopian calendar, the month of Teya, and it commemorates the baptism of Christ in the river Jordan. For 3 days, the town of Lalibela transforms. Pilgrims come from across Ethiopia, tens of thousands of them. They walk for days to reach the Highland town. They sleep in the open air, they fast, they pray, they sing. On the eve of Timkat, the tabots are taken from the churches, wrapped in their cloths, carried on the heads of priests. They are processed through the streets in a ceremony of extraordinary beauty and solemnity. The priests wear their finest vestments, robes of velvet and brocade in red and gold and green and white. They carry jeweled umbrellas. They dance, yes, dance, the Ethiopian liturgical dance. A slow, rhythmic swaying of the shoulders and head is part of the worship. David danced before the ark. The priests of Lalibela dance before the tabots. The procession moves through the tunnels and trenches of the church complex, through the narrow passages carved in the rock, emerging into the open air where the crowds wait. Thousands of white-robed pilgrims, the sound of drums and sistra and chanting voices, the scent of incense, the flicker of candles in the pre-dawn darkness. It is a scene that has not changed in 800 years. It is a living window into the medieval world. It is Christianity as it was practiced before the Reformation, before the Renaissance, before the great schisms and divisions that fractured the Church of the West. And at the climax of the festival, the faithful wade into the water, into the pools and streams and channels that thread through Lalibela, into the river Jordan. They are baptized again, renewed, washed clean by the sacred water in the sacred city carved from the sacred rock. And the churches ring with song, and the sun rises over the highlands, and the ancient covenant between God and Ethiopia is renewed for another year. There are other festivals too. Meskel, the finding of the true cross, when great bonfires called Demera are lit in the courtyards and the flames leap into the highland night and the sparks rise like prayers into the black sky. Fasika, Ethiopian Easter, preceded by 55 days of fasting that make the Western Lenten fast seem mild by comparison. Jenna, Ethiopian Christmas, celebrated not on the 25th of December, but on the 7th of January. With all-night services and processions, and the playing of a game similar to hockey in the fields around the town. Each festival brings the churches to life in a different way. Each one illuminates a different aspect of the stone. The firelight of Meskel makes the rock walls dance. The candlelight of Jenna makes them glow. The sunlight of Timkat reveals every carved detail with pitiless clarity. The churches change with the light. They change with the seasons. They change with the mood of the worshippers who fill them. They are not static. They are not fixed. They are alive in the deepest and most literal sense of the word. And they have been alive for 800 years. But let us return to the question that scholars have debated for decades. The question that has no simple answer. The question that may never be fully resolved. Did one man really build all of this? The tradition says yes. King Lalibela built all 11 churches in 23 years, roughly the length of his reign. He was helped by angels. The angels worked at night, continuing the carving while the human workers slept, so that the work progressed twice as fast as it should have. This is what the priests will tell you. This is what the faithful believe. The angels were here. Their hands shaped this stone. The churches are not merely human achievements. They are divine ones. Modern scholarship is more cautious and more complicated. Some of the churches show stylistic differences that suggest different periods of construction. Bet Mercurios, as we have discussed, may predate Lalibela entirely, but Gabriel-Rufael has architectural features that some scholars associate with an earlier period. The northern group and the eastern group may have been carved at different times, by different teams of workers, under different supervisors, perhaps even under different kings. The engineering challenges are immense. Carving a single church from solid rock requires an enormous workforce. You need quarrymen to cut the trenches. You need carvers to shape the interior. You need specialists to carve the decorative elements, the crosses and the moldings and the window frames. You need workers to remove the debris, the thousands upon thousands of tons of rock that must be cut away and carried off. You need engineers to design the drainage systems. You need someone to feed and house all of these workers. You need administrators. You need planners. You need a logistics system. Where did these workers come from? The Zagwe kingdom was not a vast empire. It was a regional power in the Ethiopian Highlands. Its population was limited. Its resources were considerable but not unlimited. To dedicate enough workers to carve 11 churches in 23 years, while also maintaining a functioning kingdom, would have required an extraordinary commitment of human resources. Some scholars estimate that thousands of workers would have been needed. Others suggest tens of thousands. And then there is the question of knowledge. Where did the Zagwe builders learn to carve monolithic churches? The technique did not spring fully formed from King Lalibela's heavenly vision. Ethiopia has a long tradition of rock-hewn architecture. In the Tigray region of northern Ethiopia, there are more than 100 rock-cut churches, some of them dating to the 6th or 7th century, centuries before Lalibela. These earlier churches are simpler, smaller. They are carved into cliff faces rather than down from the surface, but they demonstrate that the tradition of cutting churches from living rock was well established in Ethiopia long before the Zagwe dynasty. Lalibela took this tradition and elevated it to a level of ambition and technical mastery that had never been attempted before. He, or his builders, took a technique for carving small chapel caves in cliff faces and scaled it up to create freestanding monolithic buildings 12 meters tall. It was an act of audacious imagination, but it did not come from nowhere. It grew from a soil that had been cultivated for centuries, from a tradition that had been developing, refining, perfecting its techniques, church by church, generation by generation, until it was ready for its masterpiece. There is also the question of where the removed stone went. Thousands upon thousands of tons of volcanic tuff were cut from these trenches and carried away. The landscape around Lalibela shows no obvious spoil heaps, no vast mounds of discarded rubble. The stone seems simply to have vanished. Some of it was likely used for construction elsewhere. Some may have been carried into river valleys and dispersed. Some may lie beneath the fields around the town, buried by centuries of plowing and erosion. But the completeness of the disappearance is striking. It is as though the carvers not only created the churches, but also cleaned up after themselves with extraordinary thoroughness. Or perhaps, the faithful would say, the angels carried it away. The romantic theory of Templar involvement surfaces occasionally. The Knights Templar, the medieval Christian military order, had a presence in the Holy Land during the period when Lalibela's churches were being carved. Some writers have suggested that Lalibela encountered Templars during his pilgrimage to Jerusalem, and that they provided technical assistance or architectural knowledge that influenced the design of the churches. It is a seductive theory, but there is no evidence for it, no documentary evidence, no archaeological evidence, no stylistic evidence. The architecture of Lalibela is entirely Ethiopian. its decorative vocabulary, its spatial organization, its structural logic, all derive from indigenous Ethiopian and Aksumite traditions. The Templar theory says more about Western scholarship's historical reluctance to credit African civilizations with their own achievements than it does about the actual construction of the churches. For too long, the great works of African architecture and engineering were attributed to outside influences, to mysterious visitors, to lost white civilizations, to anyone except the African people who actually created them. The builders of Great Zimbabwe were said to be Phoenician. The architects of the Benin walls were said to be influenced by foreign powers, and the carvers of Lalibela were said to need European help. It is a pattern, and it is wrong. The evidence does not support it. The traditions do not support it. The architecture itself does not support it. The truth is simpler and more magnificent. Ethiopian builders, drawing on centuries of rock-hewn tradition, armed with iron tools and extraordinary skill, driven by a powerful and ancient faith, carved these churches from the living rock of their own highlands. They did it themselves. They did it brilliantly. And the churches they carved are among the greatest architectural achievements in human history. Whether it took 23 years or 200 years, whether it was one king's vision or the accumulated work of generations, whether the angels helped or not, the result is the same: 11 churches, carved from the mountain, standing in their trenches, still in use, still holy, still miraculous. And perhaps the question of authorship matters less than we think. Perhaps what matters is not who carved these churches or how long it took or whether celestial beings assisted in the night work. Perhaps what matters is the intention, the faith, the extraordinary, almost incomprehensible determination to take a mountain and turn it inside out, to find the sacred spaces hidden within the rock and set them free. Whoever did it, whenever they did it out of love, out of devotion. Out of a belief so powerful that it could move, not mountains, but the stone inside mountains. That is the true miracle of Lalibela, not the engineering, not the architecture, not the precision or the drainage or the decorative carving. The love, the sheer, staggering, mountain-moving love. Breathe in now, slowly. Feel the air enter you like light entering a church through a narrow window. Feel it fill you, feel it warm you from the inside. Breathe out, feel everything that is not rest leave your body, every worry, every tension, every unfinished thought. Let it all go out with the breath, dissipating into the darkness like incense smoke, rising and thinning and vanishing into nothing. You are very close now, very close to sleep. You can feel its presence the way you feel the presence of the rock when you stand inside one of these churches. It is all around you, above you, below you, surrounding you, holding you. It is not something you need to reach for. It is not something you need to find. It is already here. It has been here all along, waiting, patient as stone. Come back now to Bet Giyorgis. One last time, come back to the cross-shaped church in its deep stone trench. But now it is night. The sun has set behind the mountains. The sky has passed through all its colors, from gold to copper to violet to the deep, limitless indigo of a Highland night. The stars are appearing, one by one at first, and then in hundreds, and then in thousands, at this altitude, in this thin, clear air, far from the glow of any major city. The stars are extraordinary. The Milky Way is not a faint smear across the sky. It is a river, a torrent, a great white flood of light pouring across the heavens. So dense and so bright that it casts faint shadows on the stone below. Giyorgis catches the starlight on its roof. The three nested crosses carved in relief on the rooftop are visible even in the darkness, their edges defined by the faint silver glow of 10 billion distant suns. The church seems to float, suspended between the earth and the sky, between the rock below and the stars above, between the physical world and the spiritual one. The air in the trench is still, utterly still, while the wind moves across the Highland Plateau above, ruffling the grass and stirring the eucalyptus leaves. Down here in the carved channel there is no movement at all. The air hangs motionless, heavy, warm with the heat that the stone has absorbed during the day and now releases slowly into the night. It is like being inside a cocoon, a stone cocoon, sheltered from the wind and the cold and the vast, open emptiness of the Highland sky. Down here, everything is close and contained and safe. The walls hold you, the rock protects you, the night cannot reach you here. Below, inside the church, a single candle burns. Its light is warm and yellow, and it flickers in the faintest draft of air moving through the doorway. The flame casts long shadows on the stone walls. The shadows move, they sway. They dance their slow, silent dance on the carved surfaces, on the cross on the ceiling, on the smooth, worn floor where 8 centuries of barefoot worshippers have walked. A priest is here, alone, an old man in white robes. He sits on a low stool near the wall. His prayer stick rests against his shoulder. His eyes are closed, and he is chanting. The chant is quiet, almost a whisper, a private conversation between this man and his God, conducted in a language that was ancient when the churches were new. The Giyorgis syllables roll softly from his lips, each one round and warm and resonant, filling the small stone space with a sound that is both human and more than human. The stone absorbs the sound. The stone holds it. The stone has been holding these sounds for 800 years, layer upon layer of prayer. Word upon word of devotion, building up inside the rock like geological strata, invisible but present, permanent and deep. You are here in the church, in the candlelight, in the warm, close, incense-scented air. The stone is all around you, above you the carved ceiling, below you the smooth floor, cool beneath your bare feet. You removed your shoes at the entrance, as all who enter must do. The stone is cool but not cold. It holds the warmth of the day. It releases it slowly through the night, like a body releasing heat, like the earth breathing out. The chanting continues. The single voice, the ancient words, they wrap around you like a blanket, like the white cotton shawl that Ethiopian pilgrims wear, the netela draped over your shoulders and your head, soft and light and warm. You do not need to understand the words. The words are not for your mind. They are for something deeper, something older, something in you that does not need language to understand what is being said. The prayer is a sound, a vibration, a frequency that resonates with the stone and the starlight and the thin mountain air and the deep, quiet, sleeping part of you that is already halfway to dreams. The candle flame sways. The shadows move on the walls. The chanting rises and falls like breathing, like the breathing of the mountain itself, like the slow, patient, eternal breathing of the earth. You are underground, you are inside the rock. You are held by the mountain the way a child is held by its mother's arms, completely, safely, with a strength that does not need to be proved because it is simply there. The rock has been here for millions of years. The church has been here for 800. The prayers have been here for as long as there have been voices to pray them. And tonight, you are here too, part of the stone, part of the prayer, part of the ancient, ongoing, never-ending story of this place. There is nothing to do, nothing to solve, nothing to plan or worry about or attend to. There is only the stone, the candlelight, the chanting, the stars above the trench that you cannot see but know are there, the warmth of the covers around your body, the softness of the pillow beneath your head, the gentle, steady, faithful rhythm of your breathing. Sleep is not something you do. Sleep is something that comes to you. It comes the way the dawn comes to these highlands, slowly, gradually, filling the world with warmth and light and the soft sounds of a new day. But sleep fills you with the opposite, with darkness, with silence, with the deep, velvety, bottomless peace of a mind that has finally set down its burdens and allowed itself to rest. Let it come, do not reach for it, do not chase it, just lie here in the stone church, in the candlelight, in the sound of the ancient prayer, and let it find you. It knows where you are, it always knows. Incense has burned low. A thin thread of smoke still rises from the censer near the altar, rising in a straight, unwavering line in the still air of the church, and then dispersing near the ceiling, spreading out, becoming part of the atmosphere. The scent is frankincense. Ethiopia is one of the ancient sources of frankincense, the resin that has been burned in sacred spaces since before the time of Moses, the same scent that filled Solomon's temple, the same scent that the wise men brought to Bethlehem. Here in this carved stone space, it hangs in the air like a memory, sweet and ancient and indescribably comforting. The stone walls are warm to the touch. You lean your shoulder against one and feel its solidity, its permanence. This wall will be here long after you are gone, long after everyone alive today is gone. It was here before anyone alive today was born. It is not going anywhere. It cannot be moved. It cannot be shaken. It is part of the mountain, and the mountain is part of the earth, and the earth is part of everything. And leaning against this wall, you are part of everything too, connected. Held, anchored to something so ancient and so vast and so permanent that the small worries of your life, the anxieties that circle your mind like moths around a lamp, seem to shrink, to fade, to become very small and very far away, barely visible, barely audible, like sounds heard from a great distance, drifting across a highland valley, growing fainter and fainter until they are gone. The priest's voice grows softer. The chant is fading now, not ending but receding, moving deeper into the stone, as though the church itself is absorbing it, drawing it inward, holding it safe in the rock where it will wait until morning, when the chanting will begin again, as it has begun every morning for 800 years. The candle gutters, the flame shrinks, the shadows on the walls grow longer and softer and more uncertain. The light is going, the warm, golden, flickering light that has held you in this space. It is leaving now, and what replaces it is not darkness, not exactly. It is something softer than darkness, something warmer, something that feels less like the absence of light and more like the presence of rest. Outside the church, in the deep trench, the air is cool and still. The walls of the trench rise above you like the sides of a cradle. The sky is a narrow rectangle of stars far above, impossibly far, as though you are looking up from the bottom of a well. But it is not a well, it is a church that goes down instead of up, a church that burrows into the earth instead of reaching for the sky. And there is something profoundly comforting about that, about being below, about being held in the rock, about being contained and enclosed and protected by the weight and solidity of the mountain. The night creatures of the Ethiopian highlands are quiet now. The distant sound of a dog barking in the town has faded. The last footsteps of the last pilgrim returning home have died away. There is nothing left but the stone and the stars and the slow, almost imperceptible cooling of the air as the highland night deepens. Somewhere in one of the other churches, another candle still burns, a faint golden glow visible through a window carved in stone, another priest keeping vigil, another voice raised in prayer. The churches are never truly empty. Someone is always here, someone is always praying. The chain of devotion stretches through the hours of the night like a thread of gold through black cloth, unbroken, continuous, connecting this moment to the morning, and the morning to all the mornings that have come before. The churches of Lalibela sleep now, all 11 of them. Medhane Alem with its forest of columns, Maryam with its painted frescoes and its shrouded pillar, Golgotha with the bones of a king who dreamed of Jerusalem, Emanuel with its trompe l'oeil walls, Mercurios with its ancient watching eyes, Abba Libanos hanging from the rock like a prayer suspended in stone, Gabriel-Rufael with its fortress face, and Giyorgis, the jewel, the cross in the earth. The last church, the finest church, the church that Saint George demanded and a king delivered. They sleep in their trenches, they sleep in the rock, they sleep as they have slept for 800 years, patient and permanent and utterly untroubled by the passage of time. Empires have risen and fallen around them, wars have been fought, languages have changed, the world has been remade a dozen times over, but the churches remain, carved from the mountain, held by the earth, waiting for the dawn and the chanting and the barefoot pilgrims who will come again tomorrow as they came yesterday. As they will come for centuries yet to come. The night wind moves through the trenches. It enters from the east, from the direction of the distant deserts, and it threads its way through the narrow stone passages with a low, soft, almost musical sound. It is the sound of breath passing through a flute, the sound of air finding its way through stone. The trenches and tunnels of Lalibela form a vast stone instrument, and the wind plays it, night after night, year after year, a melody that has no beginning and no end. It is the lullaby of the mountain. It is the song the earth sings to itself when it thinks no one is listening. But you are listening. You are here, lying in your bed, warm and still and heavy with approaching sleep, and the wind's song reaches you across the distance, across the kilometers and the continents and the impossible gap between there and here, and it wraps around you, and it holds you, and it carries you down. You are part of this now, part of the stone and the silence and the prayer, part of the ancient, beautiful, impossible story of a king who saw heaven in a 3-day sleep and woke to carve it from the rock. Let the rock hold you. Let the stone close around you like a hand closing gently around something precious. Let the weight of the mountain press you down into sleep, not crushing but cradling, the way the earth cradles the churches, holding them safe in its red, iron-rich, warm and patient embrace. Sleep now, let the last threads of wakefulness dissolve. Let them go the way the incense smoke goes, rising and thinning and spreading until they are indistinguishable from the air itself. You do not need them. You do not need wakefulness. Not now, not here, not tonight. Sleep the way the churches sleep, deep in the rock, held by the mountain, wrapped in the silence of 800 years of prayer, safe, warm, permanent, still. The chanting has stopped. The candle has gone out. The priest has closed his eyes. The stars are wheeling slowly above the trench, turning the great wheel of the southern sky, and the cross on the roof of Giyorgis catches their light and holds it and glows faintly in the dark, a beacon, a marker, a sign that even in the deepest night, something sacred endures. In and out, in and out, like the breath of a mountain, like the prayer of a priest in an empty church. like the slow, unhurried, eternal rhythm of stone being shaped by hands that loved what they were making. Asleep. And let the churches carved from the living rock keep watch over your dreaming. Thank you for listening, and sweet dreams. If you enjoyed this, there are more stories waiting for you.